Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on my face. And as a reward, we are going to watch a 10-second Rube Goldberg Machine video. One of the few the Creative Commons allows me to share today. So here we go. We've got our nice airplane coming in. Boom, hits the balloon, cuts a rope because of a soccer ball, and then that sets off the rest of the chain reaction. So I think this is like a universal thing for engineers. We have all fallen in love with Rube Goldberg Machine videos. We've all seen them at museums. And I don't know about you guys, but I can look at them for hours and just get completely immersed in all the tiny little intricate decisions that people have made over time. Do I sense a segue? So let's talk about APIs. I think for like one moment, we should all just step back and imagine that you and all the developers around you are building something way bigger than yourselves, way bigger than your teams, and bringing together all these separate talents that you have, the knowledge, the time, and all the sort of passion you put into your work to build something meaningful that's like greater than the sum of its parts. Well, there's good news. You're already doing that every single day. And now imagine for a moment that you really cared about these developers that you're working with, these collaborators who you're building giant technical Rube Goldberg machines with. What if you cared about them and they cared about you? What, if anything, would you do differently? And I think these are all the reasons why we come together today here at this conference. It's all about making the daily lives of developers better. And as we all know, a tiny part of that story is about technology, but the rest of it is all about humans. So today I want to talk a little bit about how to make your APIs developer friendly. I'm Aidan Cunniffe. I'm the creator of the Optic open source project, which is building a lot of modern API tooling that's inspired by Git and is designed to make collaborating on your APIs a lot easier. So you could drop Optic into your project today. In a couple of minutes, it would document your entire API. And then whenever you change your API, let's say you add new endpoints or you make planned or unplanned changes to an existing endpoint, all of those changes become conversations that you can have inside of a code review. So they show up in your PR and they say, Aidan has changed this code and these APIs are affected by it. Here are the API changes. And the whole idea is basically making APIs much easier to evolve and talk about with teams. So you can see kind of how this is inspired by the research we've been doing. This talk is not about Optic, but it's about all of the conversations I've had over the last year building the project and some mindsets I stepped away with about kind of the problem at a bigger scale and how we can all make our APIs more developer friendly. Or to make this a lot more fun, we can talk about how to build a better digital Rube Goldberg machine and have fun while we do it. So oftentimes we think about the APIs as, and I think in the example of Rube Goldberg Machine, the API is like every single interface where like one part of the Rube Goldberg Machine touches another part. So you could think of the API as this moment where the airplane hits the balloon pops, and then a lot of other things happen. And we have good ways of talking about how to make API interfaces themselves better, how to make them more evolvable, what design guides we should follow, what best practices we should adopt. But we don't really talk about the other part of the Rube Goldberg machine. Behind every long YouTube video of a massive Rube Goldberg machine, there is a video about how it was built. And those to me have always been a lot more interesting because you have a bunch of engineers, obviously very smart people, but they are wholly aware in those moments that they're setting things up that they are part of a socio-technical system. They are relying on people to build their part of the machine in a way that makes the output of that part, which becomes the input to their part, knowable, understandable, modelable, and reliable so that they can build their piece well as in addition. And I think this actually kind of feels very close to what we're doing as developers now. We are building these gigantic systems that all need to fit together in nice ways. And one would ask, why would we ever do that? Like, why would we separate all of our concerns and build all these complicated systems? And there's always been pushback to microservices and some of these choices that we are making. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to something that now reveals I'm a little more economist than developer sometimes, which is that APIs constitute how we divide labor and how we collaborate. You used to collaborate by sharing code with dependency managers, with libraries, by copy and pasting, which I definitely have done in the past many, many, many years ago. And that's a certain kind of collaboration, but you could never like import the forgot password feature or SSO or billing or the ability to ship something anywhere in the world with a little library that's self-contained running on your infrastructure. APIs have allowed us to basically import entire capabilities with their own infrastructure, their own life cycles, and truly like depend on other people to build features for us. And this has led to this massive growth in what technology is able to do. Just like dividing labor throughout human history has led to massive changes in how things end up working. And I think this can be constituted, again, in like a very simple statement. I don't know how the billing works, and you don't know how the shipping works. But somehow, when customers buy a textbook on our website, it gets delivered. This is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. I don't know everything, you don't know everything, and yet when we put these pieces together, something completely emergent happens. And that's the beauty of this complexity. It's also the curse of the complexity. But if it is complex, if we are building massive systems, then by definition we're doing it collaboratively. Because we need to divide labor for three main reasons. One is you have knowledge that I do not have, that would take me a long time to learn. You have time that is better spent doing your part of the project than my time being spent on that part of the project, related to the fact that you have more knowledge. And someone has better infrastructure to do the task or do the background processing that has to happen to make all of this work. So these are the famous Death Stars that were going around the internet around a year ago for Amazon and Netflix, these gigantic service maps. And they seem big, imposing, and scary to model, and they are big, imposing, and scary to model. The only difference between Netflix and Amazon and your company is that Netflix and Amazon have actually done the modeling. And the rest of us have something that looks like this, but we do not know what it looks like. I'm sure some of you do have a better idea than others, but for most of us, we actually don't know what this topography looks like in our own company. And each of these nodes, they represent more than just a service and an API. These are actual jobs that we are doing for each other. So public APIs, they're well documented, they are well managed. And of course they are, because Twilio, Stripe, Plaid, these large API companies have so much to lose if their APIs aren't good. And a ton of incentives, processes, tools they build in-house to make it so that their APIs never break and are well documented and easily evolvable. But for the rest of us, most of our API experience is internal APIs. It's the team over there, or the team over there, or the team over there that we're collaborating with. And internal APIs tend to be more Wild West, which is interesting. Like, we have this iceberg where we, the tip of it is the public APIs, where there's a lot of good practices and a lot of good examples of documentation. And then there's like everything else, which is the APIs we all use daily. And to me, that's like the interesting opportunity, because I want to, spend my time trying to make things better that the rest of us are doing daily. And there seems to be a ton of leverage in solving this Wild West internal API problem. So let's talk about that a little more. There are a lot of internal API challenges. If you're a consumer, you often are wondering, how do I use this API? You also often find yourself wondering, given some new use case you have, is there an API already built for this that I can use, that the company's already set up? Is that new API stable? How often does it change? Am I swallowing an integration that's going to take me an hour, but then will also take an hour every single week for the next year? Or is it going to take me 10 hours up front, but it's going to be stable and never change afterward and robust? These are trade-offs. We all will make them, but we don't always have the information we need to make them well. Is there a better API out there for what I need? Like, I found this one, or someone told me to use this one, but is there a better one out there that I should be using? And if I need something new, where and how do I ask for it? Who's responsible for this? There's not often a good sort of process for asking for new things in these APIs. If you're a producer, it's always a challenge to figure out, how do we document the API and how do we keep that documentation up to date? People have tried everything, but there haven't been good tools and good processes that make this easy for teams, even though they know it's really important. Also, what parts of my API are actually important? To which teams? What are their use cases? Perhaps a lot of my API isn't being used anymore. Why am I still maintaining it? Is it safe to change this API? Is it being used by a lot of people? Can I talk to those people? Do they have time to make changes if I have to break the API for some reason? And who will be affected, by each change that I make? This thing over here in the corner might seem innocuous, but is it affecting a legacy system that will never be updated again? Or is it affecting this new R&D project where the team has some bandwidth to make a change? We just don't know. We don't understand these big Death Stars in our company, which makes a lot of the decision making much more opaque and hard to do right. But there's always these two constants. So we're always going to be building new tracks. There are always new features and new deliverables and new things we have to work on. And the APIs and the business that we're building them for are always going to be changing. So the fact that the tracks ever meet up in the middle is the miracle. The fact that the world currently exists and all the APIs are not broken is a miracle. And it's a testament to the fact that engineers are already having these conversations and already working hard to align with one another. And I see those as little nudges, the tracks are diverging and there's little nudges that are pushing us kind of back into alignment. And this is really awesome, but I think it can be way easier and have a lot less friction. I think part of this just comes down to reframing how we talk about internal APIs. So you don't use APIs. You're in API relationships. And I think this is really important because it adds a human layer back into this that sometimes is easy for engineers and just developers and busy people in general to remove. We are not just creating endpoints, or we are not just creating new affordances in our systems. We are in a relationship with another team. We are helping them get some job done, and we should have pretty strong conviction about what our responsibility is to them, what their responsibility is to us. And like all relationships, oftentimes we know that we should be doing things, but we don't always do them. And I think putting these words into our vocabulary help us recognize what is actually going on and maybe treat the other teams around us a little better. I think similarly for internal APIs, for people working on the same giant Rube Goldberg machine, which is a company's technical team, we need to take server, client, producer, consumer out of our vocabulary and just talk about people as they are. They're collaborators. We sometimes only think that API producers have the responsibility here, but I think consumers have a lot of responsibility too to tell the API producers how they're using the API, what they actually need, what they're using those APIs for, and I think just making it so that we're all on the same tier is really important to having these conversations and building the right kind of culture. And the other thing is we need to stop talking about breaking APIs for a bunch of reasons. But I think most importantly, you don't actually break APIs. You ruin people's afternoons. And that happens sometimes immediately after you make the change because it breaks in staging or it breaks in a pre-prod environment or, God, hopefully not in production. But at the end of the day, there's a person on the other side of this. You're not just changing an interface of an API. There's an engineer who built their part of the Rube Goldberg machine and was all excited, standing there at the museum watching the marble coming down the chute, and then it didn't work. And someone was like, "You're in trouble now," and you ruined an afternoon. So I think we really need to just think about this stuff in human terms. And I will die on the hill of most technical problems being human problems. But I think some of this vocabulary updates can be helpful, or at least talking about this stuff with your team can help everyone sort of get a better understanding of where all things stand in the organization. So let's go through a little checklist of what leads to sort of a developer-friendly culture in this world of creating a nicer Rube Goldberg machine internally at our companies. So is every API documented, and is it documented accurately? This is really important because it saves everybody time. It saves the people who are trying to use the API time because they can go figure out how to use it without interrupting you a lot of the time. And the flip side of that, like I said, is your team doesn't have to be interrupted as much. Obviously, conversations will still happen, and they probably should still happen. But good documentation is a placeholder for those conversations and helps everyone kind of move autonomously and faster. It also makes API integrations more maintainable. what? This API can return a 404 and a 401 and a 403? Like, I've only coded it against the 200. Now I know that there's these other things that can happen because it's been written down, and I can make my integration more robust and less likely to cause problems downstream later. You also will sometimes discover that something you thought you needed a new API for already exists somewhere else. And if all the APIs are documented well and it's easy to discover them, companies often realize that they have duplicated a ton of API functionality that they didn't need to duplicate. So this can help you sort of see that and save time on the long span from not having like redundant systems you're building and maintaining. And it also helps a lot with security and compliance. One thing that I've heard over and over and over again is that it's really hard for security and compliance teams to understand what is actually going on in all of these APIs. And they might get an accurate spec, once a year or twice a year or something like that. So a lot of these kinds of issues can seep into the APIs in a way that isn't obvious to the people who are tasked with governing them and making them safe. So the more things are documented, the easier it is to avoid some of these really serious security issues and to stay compliant in all the ways that matter to your business. Another really important sort of question that you should ask yourself is, do you know when your API behavior changes and who those changes might affect? So if you know when your API behavior changes, you can catch bugs, you can catch regressions way, way, way earlier in the process because you can see right there and then, hey, this line of code had this unintended consequence and it changed the API contract. So if you're able to see whenever your API changes, you will find these things early in the process and be able to fix them. You also can talk about API design really early. So a lot of times when there's not observability into how APIs are changing, an engineer will add a new endpoint, and maybe there's some small stylistic change they could have made to make it better. But because that makes it all the way through to a consumer in a real environment, their ability to now go change it is much less easy. So creating this conversation early helps us not just avoid breaks, but also build better APIs. And the dirty little secret about a lot of breaking changes is that teams make them knowing that they are making them, but they are accommodating a poor API design choice that was made many months before. So all of this stuff is related, and I think just creating the conversations early has huge leverage, and we've already seen that with some teams on Optic. It's also really important to plan and coordinate your changes with your consumers. Like we said, there are no such things as breaking changes. There are only ruined afternoons. So if you're able to give a team time to upgrade, they will be able to upgrade. And all of your stuff can be a whole lot better because of that. So this is really important, just knowing who in that dependency graph is affected by any change you make and creating that conversation before the change actually happens, not after. And that makes everything a whole lot healthier. Also, do you know who uses your API and what their use cases are? So this is really important because I would say something like 20% of the fields in our APIs and the endpoints that we've built, if you've been around for several years, are no longer being used by anyone. There's a lot of functionality we could prune from our big API graph that we've baked. But unfortunately, because we don't have observability into who is using our APIs and for what, it's really difficult to know when we can retire things, which means that over time, a lot of companies see that the size of their request bodies and response bodies just get bigger and bigger and bigger, but they never get smaller. And that makes the code a whole lot harder to maintain. It makes it a lot harder for a new team to come in and understand how the API works because there's all this other stuff in there that might not be relevant anymore to their use case. So there's huge upside if you can prune a ton of your API graph. And knowing how people use your API is a big part of that. That observability is super important. It also helps you build better APIs. We have all lived in a world where we've had loose requirements before. And if we don't understand the use cases of our consumers, if we don't foster these relationships and learn about the people on the other end of it, we might build something that works but isn't optimal or isn't evolvable or won't do what they need it to do next in a compatible way. So understanding these use cases and really documenting those and writing those down, like Like let tools automatically document your APIs for you, but spend the human time writing down the use cases that your consumers have shared with you, and just make sure that you're always keeping that up to date, because that will help all of your engineers you're working with build the better API. So doing this, it is definitely hard, and I think obviously like these are not things you can just start tomorrow and have them all working perfectly. But I would say that the API tooling space is working really hard because we've acknowledged that we need better documentation, observability, ways of cataloging our API relationships, and understanding API usage. And there's a lot of new tools that are coming trying to make this easier. I think in the meantime, the part of this and the reason why I took the time to put all this together is that we can still all step back and do our own small piece of this. We can start fostering the human side. We can stop just thinking about the API that we're building and start thinking about all the people on that assembly line that we're working with together. And as we move forward from the talk today, I would just encourage everyone who is in these API relationships to just take the time to set up a virtual coffee and to understand the use cases better and to write things down and to try to be more conscious of these API relationships that we're all in every single day. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this is interesting and not just a bunch of jargon and ideas. I think that there's just a whole lot that we gain when we add the human back into the story. And I'm hopeful that the way I share things today is helpful to you, your teams, and can build better API relationships in your company. I'll be on Discord. I'm also on Twitter all the time. You can check out the Optic project on our GitHub if you want. And I'm really excited about making APIs developer friendly. If you have ideas for how to make it more friendly, or tools you'd like us to build, or conversations you want to have, I'm going to be here all day, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about this. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here at the conference, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.